One of the most heated rivalries in all of college basketball is between two of the most polarizing coaches in the game.
So there's always one dumb statement. So far it's been good. I've been here 1 month and you've come up with the first dumb one.
In a state where basketball is religion, two men became gods. One brought redemption through order.
Opportunity upon opportunity upon opportunity. You're like children with bad things happening. Instead of digging in and be tougher, you wilt. Where is your toughness? Don't you know what adversity is all about? That's the game of life, not the game of basketball. You don't down when things go wrong. You dig in and get tougher. Your whole life's gonna be adversity. Learn how to deal with it.
The other, revolution through chaos.
Now, you're going to cost us a game, guess what? I'll take you out. But short of that, you make a turnover, you miss a shot, I'm not. Not diving on a loose ball, getting beat to some rebounds, not hustling back, not matching down, so exhausted you can't talk, you come out.
They didn't just build teams, they built empires. And for over 3 decades, they clashed in locker rooms, in press conferences, in Final Fours. This wasn't just a rivalry. It was a vendetta. Before the drama, before the headlines, they were builders. 2 coaches, 2 visions, each reshaping the game in their own image. Starting as an interim head coach for the Rainbow Warriors, Rick Pitino got his first real chance at being head coach for Boston University at the age of 25. In a city full of basketball tradition and a school that had none, Pitino was set on making his mark. This is where we saw his signature coaching style first develop: relentless full court press and a fast-paced offense. In 5 years, he helped lead BU from obscurity to an NCAA playoff berth. This was more than just a stepping stone. This is where it all began. Rick Pitino rose to prominence in the Northeast, cutting his teeth in Big East battles at Providence. Ball movement like clockwork. Defense that didn't just pressure, it punished. And shooters that could torch you from anywhere. Pitino's system didn't ask for mercy, and it didn't give any either. For the old guard, it wasn't just hard to stop, it was impossible to survive. In 1987, in just his second season, he took a small school with no pedigree and no reason to dream big to their first Final Four appearance in 13 years. When Rick Pitino arrived in Lexington in 1989, he wasn't walking into a program. He was walking into a crime scene. Kentucky was in ruins. Scandal, sanctions, 2 years banned from the tournament, with wins erased and a legacy stained. The blue blood had turned black. But Pitino didn't flinch. He didn't come to repair the damage. He came to rebuild the empire. With relentless discipline, a lightning-fast offense, and a swagger stitched into every possession, he brought energy back to a program that had been shunned by the sport it once ruled. John Calipari was cut from a different cloth. Gritty, combative, the kind of coach who barked at refs and dared the NCAA to challenge him.
He got the warning in the first half. Well, that was an interesting one, Jimmy, because he was down where his players are.
A chip on his shoulder the size of every blue blood that ever said no. He never just arrived. He descended with fire in his wake. At UMass, he built a contender from dust, took a forgotten program and lit a fire under it until the whole country had to look their way. And in just his 4th season at UMass, he led them to the Sweet 16 to face off against the second best team in the nation, Pitino and his Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky flexed their dominance and even led by 21 points during one stretch of the game, but the Minutemen clawed their way back to within 2. But Jamal, Monster Mash, Mashburn, and the Wildcats were too much for UMass to handle. Some even going as far to blame the loss on a controversial technical foul that was called on Calipari by ref Lenny Wirtz during a crucial possession for being out of the coach's box.
I believe he's on the officials now. Oh, wow. Right in the top middle of your screen, he's jumping up and down to get his guys to move back on the zone.
I don't think there's any doubt.
Kentucky went on to play against Duke in the Elite Eight, where Christian Laettner goes on to hit the shot as time expired to end the Wildcats season. So I guess you can say the ball doesn't lie.
There's the pass to Laettner. Puts it up. Yes!
Fast forward to the Meadowlands in 1996. It's the Final Four. On one sideline, the sharp-dressed architect of Kentucky's resurrection, a coach forged in the fires of New York toughness and NBA polish. And on the other, the relentless young disruptor from UMass, hungry, unproven, and unafraid. From the tip, it wasn't subtle. Kentucky came at UMass in waves. Pressure, speed, firepower. Pitino's squad played like men possessed, a storm in blue and white with 9 future NBA players. But UMass didn't flinch. They were led by Marcus Camby, the nation's best player, and Calipari had them believing they could do the unthinkable. For stretches, it was a fight. Gritty, chippy, and emotional. 2 coaches barking from the sidelines, daring each other to blink. But Kentucky's depth was too deep, too fast, and too relentless. The machine Pitino built didn't just beat you, it broke you down. When the buzzer sounded, the scoreboard told the story. Kentucky 81, UMass 74. Calipari had arrived, but Pitino had conquered, and the fire between them was just getting started. And when the nets were cut down that April, it was Pitino standing on the ladder. The program he revived, now crowned as champions. In just 8 seasons, he dragged Kentucky from disgrace to dominance, from shame to a championship. 2 Final Fours and a national title. When Kentucky needed a savior, it wasn't a player who stepped up. It was Rick Pitino. He left Kentucky on top of the basketball world, the savior of Kentucky basketball. By 1996, John Calipari had done the unthinkable. He dragged UMass, a forgotten mid-major, all the way to the Final Four. Calipari didn't have time to enjoy the run his team had, though. The NCAA launched an investigation. His star, Marcus Camby, had accepted money and gifts from agents, and when the smoke cleared, their postseason dominance erased. The Final Four appearance stripped. Calipari left to go to the pros, but left UMass in shambles. They both left for the NBA, chasing a new challenge, a new kind of glory. But the pros weren't home.
Larry Bird's not walking through that door, fans. Kevin McHale's not walking through that door, and Robert Parrish is not walking through that door.
The game was different. The power, distant, and the passion, diluted. What they built in college, control, culture, and identity, was gone. But college basketball wasn't done with either of them. And soon, the pull of March came calling again. Because their hearts were never in the luxury suites or the long seasons. They were in the madness, where every possession mattered and every march told a new story. In 2001, Rick Pitino returned, this time to Louisville, the arch rival of the very program he once saved. It was betrayal to some.
He's cheating UK, like he's being a traitor.
But to Pitino, it was a challenge. New colors, but the same fire. While Pitino resurrected in Louisville, Calipari found redemption in Memphis. Everywhere they went, comparisons followed. Pitino, the master tactician, and Calipari, the recruiter king. Fire versus steel, tradition.
And I can tell you this from 45 years of experience. When you play for the name on the front, the back prospers.
Versus flash.
You're gonna hate me because I come to your town and we beat your team.
They traded wins against one another like boxers trading blows, and each time their paths crossed, it felt heavier, a little louder, like the game itself knew this is where the story is. Pitino had turned the Cardinals into something dangerous, not flashy, not polished, but ruthless. 10 deep, pressure defense, and threes from the logo. A sideline general who never stopped barking. And his rival, Calipari, built something terrifying in Memphis. Not just a contender, a storm. Speed, size, talent. He turned one-and-done talent into a dynasty engine. He didn't just build a team, he built a brand. He built pipelines. He didn't care about tradition, he cared about leverage. It's 2008. Both coaches made a deep playoff run. Pitino's Cardinals stormed through the bracket, Louisville showcasing their prowess through the entire tournament, until they reached the Elite Eight, where their run ended in heartbreak. Pitino's Cardinals fell to the North Carolina Tar Heels, while his adversary, Calipari, stood on the edge of history. 38 wins and a national title within reach, and one prodigy at the center of it all, Derrick Rose.
Almost lost the handle. Chalmers for the tie.
Memphis fell to Kansas in overtime. Calipari just 1 minute away from glory, just 1 minute from hoisting the trophy. And before the wounds could even close, the investigation came. Questions surfaced about Derrick Rose's SAT score, and when the NCAA finished its investigation, the price was steep. And even though the NCAA had no substantial evidence proving that Derrick Rose was guilty of any wrongdoing, 38 wins and their tournament run gone. A season for the ages erased from the record books. What was once Calipari's greatest triumph became his greatest asterisk. Memphis fell from grace, and Calipari walked away. He left behind a crater, a fan base in disbelief, and a legacy rewritten. But he wasn't done, because in 2009, the blue blood came calling. To some, he was a rogue, a rule bender. To others, a visionary, 10 steps ahead of a game that could not catch him.
Because I can recruit the best of the best here. That's why I'm here.
They weren't just coaching rivals anymore. They were tectonic forces pulling a state apart. Rick Pitino, the former king of Kentucky, now dressed in red, a traitor in the eyes of the UK faithful, a ghost that haunted the program he once built. John Calipari, the insurgent, now dressed in blue, younger, louder, backed by talent, and crowned with power. They stood on opposite sides of the same state, commanding armies of blue and red. Lexington and Louisville weren't just cities anymore. They were battle flags. One ruled with the playbook, the other ruled with the pipeline. Pitino preached discipline, loyalty, and legacy, and Calipari promised freedom, NBA dreams, and dominance. By 2012, both teams were elite. Louisville forged in Pitino's relentless image, and Kentucky overflowing with Calipari's NBA-bound prodigies. Every meeting was a war. Every press conference, a chess move. Every handshake, colder than the last. This wasn't about wins and losses anymore. This was about who Kentucky belonged to. One wore blue, the other was in red. But what they represented went deeper than color. They were ideologies, philosophies, and gods amongst men. Rick Pitino had returned, reborn in Louisville, carrying scars, secrets, and the weight of his past. His name once graced the rafters of Rupp Arena. Now he stood as Kentucky's greatest threat. And John Calipari had taken the NCAA by storm, not just by winning, but dominating. Number 1 seeds, NBA stars in the waiting, and a machine perfectly built, humming toward destiny. Not in Lexington, not in Louisville, but in New Orleans, under the lights of the Final Four, everything collided, with only legacy to lose. The Commonwealth split down the middle, bars packed, houses divided, and families wearing different colors at the dinner table. This wasn't a game, it was a civil war. 2 titans, 1 state, a chance to play for a national title. The game was brutal, physical, and every possession was a war. Pitino threw everything at them: traps, schemes, emotion. Pitino's Cardinals clawed back from a 13-point deficit, but in the final minutes, talent won out. Calipari's Wildcats were too fast, with depth too deep, and too young to feel the pressure. Kentucky advanced and Louisville fell. This was never about basketball though. It was about control, about legacy, about the soul of Kentucky basketball. And Calipari had finally beaten Pitino when it mattered most, and days later, he would lift a national championship trophy. For Pitino, it was the deepest cut, but for Calipari, it was the ultimate vindication. In that moment, the rivalry hit its peak. Two legends, two cities, and one state torn in two. But in Kentucky basketball, nothing is ever over, or at least, not really. But legacies are never written in one night. While Calipari's Wildcats were still basking in the glow of their 2012 championship, Pitino was sharpening his blade. For Pitino, the Final Four loss was a wound, but not the end. The very next year, he returned with a vengeance. They thought he was done. After trading blue for red, they wrote him off, called him washed, a relic of the past. But Rick Pitino didn't falter. He adapted, hardened, and in 2013, he came for everything. Louisville wasn't a rebuild. It was a statement, a machine made in Pitino's image. Ruthless defense, relentless pressure, and guards with ice in their veins. They weren't supposed to be the ones cutting nets, but Pitino never followed the script. He just wrote the ending. And when the moment came, he took it. Louisville ran through the tournament like a team possessed, pressing, scrapping, diving, and in the final, they bled for every point. And on April 8th, 2013, Louisville became national champions. He didn't just return, he ascended. And Pitino became the first coach to win a national title with two different schools. But glory fades fast. An escort scandal, a federal investigation.
The former Cardinals director of basketball operations, McGee was accused of bankrolling nearly 24 parties inside Minardi Hall on the University of Louisville campus. Parties where strippers and prostitutes were used to lure recruits.
Banners came down and wins erased, with a reputation shattered. The man who once walked on water in college basketball was exiled from the sport entirely when he was fired in 2017. And then, the silence. No sidelines, no pressers, just a name whispered in the shadows of what once was. And for both men, the fire dimmed, not all at once, but like a slow dusk over a battlefield long abandoned. Time moved on. The game changed. But some names never fade. Rick Pitino, exiled and disgraced, rebuilt his name the only way he knew how. On the hardwood. After a redemption run at Iona, he took the reins at St. John's, hoping to bring Big East basketball back to life and to prove there was still greatness left in him. John Calipari stayed at Kentucky long enough to raise banners and long enough to watch the shine fade. By 2024, the weight of unmet expectations had grown too heavy. Top recruits kept coming, but the banners didn't. Early exits, empty marches, and questions he's never faced before. The system that once felt futuristic now felt fragile. Days later, after the tournament exit, Calipari accepted the head coaching job at Arkansas, a fresh start and a new stage. Calipari departed the kingdom he once ruled, stepping into Arkansas with something to prove and nothing to lose. And when the bracket settled in March of 2025, it's like the strings of fate brought them back together. Pitino versus Calipari. The names were older, the jerseys were different, but the weight was the same. Two legends, two programs reborn on one stage. This was the ghost of a rivalry, resurrected by the game itself. The weight of decades, of press clippings, of banners won and banners lost. Two minds still chasing perfection, and two fires that refused to go out. The game wasn't a blowout, it was a grind. a chess match between two generals who had studied each other for half a lifetime. But in the final minutes, it was Arkansas who closed. Faster, smarter, and sharper. Calipari walked away with the win, but in a rivalry like this, no victory is final. No ending is certain. Because even now, the fire still burns, and fate, well, fate always comes back around. Was this the final chapter? Maybe. Maybe not. Because some rivalries don't end with the buzzer. And as long as the game still breathes, so does the fire. For years, they stood on opposite sides of a state, opposite ends of the court, and opposite ends of the basketball philosophy spectrum. One, sharp-suited and surgical, the other, loud, brash, and relentless. To fans, to media, to each other, they were opposites, philosophically, culturally, and personally. But in truth, they were mirrors. Two men chasing greatness, haunted by legacy, obsessed with control, and unwilling to be forgotten. What makes a rivalry unforgettable, though, isn't just difference, it's similarity. Both of the coaches were obsessed with greatness, and both of the men hated losing more than they loved winning. Both builders of empires and believers in their own mythology. Both walked away from scandal, and they came back. Rick Pitino was still pacing the sidelines in New York City. Older now, maybe wiser, but still chasing one more run, one more title, one more thing to cap off his legendary career. And John Calipari, after 15 years in Lexington, now starts again in Arkansas. New team, new stage, with the same hunger. Maybe they were never even enemies, just two sides of the same ambition, refusing to fade. In the end, the rivalry was never just about Kentucky. It was about two coaches more alike than either would ever admit. Two men, two legacies, and a rivalry that outlived the scoreboard, burned through time, and carved their names into the soul of the game.
And he seems a little overwhelmed by my girth and tonnage, right?